Hello and welcome to Tradecraft Tuesday. We are your hosts, Kyle, John, and I'm Chris. And Tradecraft Tuesday, if you've never been here before, you've never seen the show before, we try to take techniques and things that hackers are doing. We try to break them down, inform the community on them so that everybody can kind of get better, understand what they're looking for, and we try to dig into some of the more technical aspects of it. Rather than just being like a high-level marketing, we want to give you some information that you could use or learn from. So,
news? We're gonna news it up?
Yeah. Well. Before that, we should talk about the questions. So, a little administrivia. If you have questions, use the Zoom question and answer capability. That way, we can kind of see them. We can answer them live, or if we don't get to it live, somebody can like type the answer in and get back to you. And that way, you don't feel like we skipped out on you. There is a chat as well. If you ask questions in chat, sometimes we see them and pull them out, sometimes not. So best to use the Q&A. But yeah, let's get into some news. Phishing attacks. So phishing attacks are nothing new. But what is new is kind of how some of these attackers are using them. Like people are getting real creative with their email messages now. Like we got sexual harassment complaints. Things pretending to be sexual harassment complaints that are actually phishing emails, holiday emails and cards with the holidays coming up. People are sending out like e-cards and crap like that.
Same story, different year, right?
Yeah, like don't open those. Bad idea. In the U.S., we got one more year till the 2020 elections. Political messages are already starting to ramp up with all kinds of craziness as far as like, trying to get you to open up different emails about different political situations. So basically the takeaway from this is like phishing emails have always been a problem, but now the attackers are actually starting to get more creative with them. So be on the lookout. If you can, try to educate your users on this kind of stuff, right? Would you guys say anything else?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of it, right? You're here as a recipient, but the bigger goal is not just us in a webcast, right? It's how do we actually take actionable info and kind of evangelize a little bit. It's kind of the best thing that geeks like us can do at the end of the day. So yeah, spread the news, spread the gospel.
Cool. So Bleeping Computer is reporting on some specially crafted zip files that bypass email gateway scanning. Probably everyone here, every IT department, every managed service provider has some sort of email scanning capability to try and find malicious executables, and most of them will scan attachments like zip files and stuff, trying to figure out is there a malicious file in here. These attackers actually figured out how to craft a zip file with two records in there. The first one is like a benign PNG that's just called like order.png, and it looks like like your typical invoice. But then the second record is the actual malware. Yep. And what was interesting is Bleeping Computer went through and they did a bunch of analysis, and they found depending on which tool you use to unzip the file, you got one file or the other. So like with Windows, it would complain that it was bad, but then it would extract the PNG. But then with some, I think it was like WinZip.
I tried it with 7-zip, and it was like, hey, you've got appended random data at the end of the zip file. So it wasn't quite like, as efficient, right? I don't even think I could download the actual shady attachment, but it did warn me that there was something else in the file. So
I was trying to figure out from that, based on that fact, did they tailor this file for somebody specifically who they knew was using one of the affected zip things?
But the article says Power Archiver, WinRAR, and older 7-zip utilities.
Yeah.
They're the only ones that were able to open it.
Yeah, so I thought that was interesting.
So they were going after my mom, is what it was, using WinZip 3 or something like that.
Yes. Well, they might have included a link to the executable that they needed to open. Hey, download this and then run this zip file.
Yeah, exactly.
They're trying to be helpful.
Yeah, but I mean, with sharing is caring, right? And we've got plenty of ransomware news this month.
Yep.
Does that mean it's like ransom care, right? Or you see where I'm going?
Okay. For anybody who's on O365, Microsoft just had their conference. Is it called Ignite or something?
Yeah,
like that?
Ignite. It was in Orlando.
Yeah. So they just had their conference. They announced a bunch of security features that they're adding. Like the main four that I could see are like Application Guard is going to open attachments in a virtualized container. So if they're malicious attachments, even if they're able to get execution, they're locked in a container. So hopefully, that should keep your files from getting ransomed, keep a lot of stuff from, even if you do open the attachment, keep you from getting the malware. They have some AI-powered security and compliance guidance. Anybody want to take a guess as to what the heck that means?
A lot of if-then statements and a little bit of learning.
I have no idea, but that was one of their main features. Insider risk management. I thought this one was kind of interesting. They have insider risk. Everybody's worried about like people extracting stuff, emailing it out or whatever. They're doing some sort of like risk management around this and providing like guidance for it. So I thought that was kind of cool. And then probably the most interesting was the Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection. So they're dubbing that Enhanced Compromise Detection and Response.
So yeah, you can clearly see Microsoft's continuing to double down. I guess what that helps reiterate to us is on the daily, we get I'm upgraded now, end of life of Windows 7, I'm on Windows 10. Windows 10 is better and more secure, right? And the answer is yes, it absolutely is. There's a lot of built-in features, a lot of additional telemetry they grab that makes Windows 10 better. But Microsoft wouldn't be doubling and tripling down on this layered security approach if it wasn't still a risk. So let's keep that in mind as we're selling security or urging our customers and urging, the people in our companies to update their IT to modern flavors of Windows, that this is clearly still existing. And maybe a good example of that, right? We talked about a couple months ago, brute forcing like RDP vulnerabilities, things like that.
Yep.
And what happened is I think we saw the very first iterations of BlueKeep being exploited, right? That's that old, it's been patched now. It was almost 6 months ago that it came out.
That long?
I think so, that Microsoft patched it. What's interesting about it is they more or less abused the Metasploit module. And if I recall, it was doing crypto coin miners, right?
Yes. Yeah, for whatever reason, they're deploying crypto coin miners as opposed to ransomware. I don't know. Maybe I haven't checked. Maybe Monero is super hot right now.
Yeah, it seems to be the rise and fall. But
did you see the I can't think of the guy's name. The guy from the UK who set up all the like honeypots for RDP.
Oh yeah, this is Kevin Beaumont.
Yeah, Kevin Beaumont. So he said he had all these like listeners set up. I think what he does is just goes around and rents like VPS instances in a bunch of different countries and stuff. And he said they were pretty quiet for a while. Then all of a sudden they started blue screening and rebooting. And so he knew something was up. So I guess he and Malware Tech Blog, they were working together looking at some of the memory dumps, and they found a bunch of BlueKeep artifacts in the memory dump. So from their perspective, they were like, okay, like somebody's clearly weaponized. It might not be 100% effective. Maybe it crashes some boxes, but it's actually spreading Monero miners through BlueKeep now. So
I think that's a perfect note, right? We're talking about at the end of the day. I hate when folks get overly cliche and say stuff like cyber weapons, but we're talking about initial access that enables whether they're criminals or maybe nation state adversaries to actually, deliver a pack with their punch, right? It could be Monero miners. Most often, when it comes to crime, where it's been ransomware, right? That's been really hot in 2019.
Yes.
And so the whole purpose of today's episode is to dive into the economy that is ransomware as a service. Our team gets the privilege of getting to, attend roughly like 50 trade shows a year. And so we get to meet people from very technical to folks that are just getting their security chops underneath them or getting some skills. And one thing that we realized is a lot of people didn't really realize all the different personas that go into ransomware as a service. They don't understand how the ransomware actually works. So this episode is going to start from a high-level intro. We're going to talk all about like the different flavors, what the background of this, but we're going to get technical. We're talking about all the way to the point of actually dumping live configurations that were used to target MSPs, really get into some statistics we've never shared before, and really point into some additional like awesome articles for you all to learn more. And the reason for this is obviously learning. We want you to go back and share with the office of how this works, but it also is super important to convey for like marketing and sales. When somebody is saying, Chris, why in the world do I need this product? Or why in the world do I need to reinvest in security? Like there is now a whole economy about targeting small and medium-sized businesses, let alone the enterprise who've always been targeted. So hold on to your pants in this episode. It's going to be crazy.
Yeah. I mean, we sell through a channel. these attackers now have channel sales as well. It's pretty crazy.
So who wants to start it out, right? I think the best place is probably a little bit of history in case folks
Actually,
have...
before we get into the ransomware, we need a big disclaimer.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
So
yeah.
One thing that we get every now and then, yes, this is Huntress as a company presenting this. Huntress is not a product designed to find ransomware. We just more or less educate our audience on the stuff we see every day. So before I get the email, before we end up with this live webcast that says, Kyle, are you sure you guys should be talking about ransomware? Let's make sure that's super clear, because poor John has to deal with the ramification of that.
If we're not clear on that, sales and threat ops is going to come beat us up. And like, now we have to tell all these people, and you told them, and so like, look, we'll just be clear. We don't detect or prevent ransomware. We're working on some things to try and get some early detection after it happens, to try and tell you like which files are encrypted, which hosts. We found that for a lot of our customers who get infected, that's one big question they have, is they don't know which hosts are infected and which aren't.
My Slack is literally blowing up with the sales team saying thank you. So anyway, I think we've covered it enough.
Yeah.
There's the big disclaimer. So let's get into the fun part now.
So we want to get into, I guess we should start with like, kind of what is like the history of ransomware? How has it evolved? How did it start? So somebody want to take, I kind of set this up in like 3 cases, or really 2. It was like prior to GANCrab, pre-GANCrab and post-GANCrab. So do we want to start with like pre-GANCrab?
Yeah, I've got a super simple analogy that'll allow you to kick this off, right? When hackers started in the early 90s, right, it was the same hacker that was creating the tools, that was delivering the tools, that was then conducting the attack, right? That's pretty much how things started, all the way, I guess, even to like the 70s and 80s was still that way as well. Yeah. Single attacker. As things evolved, even like at our time doing intelligence gathering, the same people writing tools, right? All 3 of us were actually the folks doing development. There was different folks that would analyze and different folks that would actually be operators. So it's morphed into this point that it's not always the same personas and it's not always the same reasons. And if you look at ransomware, it kind of started the same way, right? It was a lot of one-off ransomwares to encrypt files. I can remember back to some of the earliest, like when it was actually called ransomware.
Is it called ransomware now?
It's called ransomware, but before, right, there was always this concept of maybe I delete your boot partition and deny access. But now that we're in the age of ransomware,
because like crypto wasn't so much a thing back then. No. It was like I'd like delete your files, or I remember there's like in the old versions of Windows before, like basically like FAT32 and stuff, you could replace the first character of a file name with this special character, and Windows treated that as being deleted.
Yeah, and there wasn't so much ransom either. There was no extortion piece.
There was no way to pay.
It was just Chris being a jerk on the internet, right?
Right, because what was I going to do? Like, hey, send your money order to P.O. Box 324, how are you going to get paid?
Oh, man. Yeah. Sub 7, right, had a time deletion option back in the days, and back orifice as well. Like, after a certain amount of time, right, I'm a ticking time bomb, right? I'm going to explode. So, but things changed, right? Things changed a whole lot. We started getting into the Bitcoin miners. Obviously, crypto coin started, blowing up as a way to anonymously pay people, which was is some of the infrastructure that enabled this paying of ransom anonymously or pseudo-anonymously, right? Yeah. And so we started getting things like, I could remember all the different flavors of CryptoLocker, right? CryptoLocker V1, CryptoLocker 2. And these were still, although they might have been crimeware backed or, adversary backed, they definitely weren't kind of like sales. When Ford probably moved his first cars off the line, I imagine Henry Ford was selling as individuals. He then created sales reps that later gave birth to dealerships. Yeah, dealerships and stuff, and similar things now. Did you guys have anything else you wanted to add in the historics of where this gone? Because the roadmap is huge, right?
Yeah.
We had these individual lone wolf ransom.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But then like GANCrab, things started changing a little bit with GANCrab. Anybody want to dive into how that changed so much, or did I miss anything in there?
No. I mean, the only notes I had were like primarily one-offs. Ability to pay the ransom was like super hard. And the technical sophistication varied widely. The only other thing that I think you didn't cover there was pre-GANCrab. I don't know if you remember, like there would be a new ransomware variant, and then like a couple weeks later, somebody would release a decryptor because the attacker's code was garbage and left the key in memory or something. But like you don't see that anymore.
Yeah, this is a great example of, could you imagine being the same person writing the ransomware? Maybe you're not the best software dev, and now you've got to hack somebody and get initial access, and now you've got to spread it and extort it, right? That's just a lot for any one person to do, right? Chris, John, and I don't have the same skill sets, and we're just 3 people in this room. The same thing for your MSP, right? Or your IT department. There's no way that you guys all have the same skill set. And so what happened is we noticed there's kind of a rise of, look, me as a developer, maybe I'm just better off creating the ransomware myself. Right. And so GanCrabble was one of those, early ones that took advantage of this, where GanCrabble was unique in the sense it was malware authors. They were writing their own ransomware. And with that ransomware they were writing, they were specifically going to the point of saying, all right, I am only going to write this and I'm going to have affiliates, spread it for me.
Right.
And some of that was like law-based too, wasn't it? Wasn't there? There's some states or some countries that if you actually write the ransomware, it's not the same crime as it is of you deploying the ransomware. Right. So this is where you get like safe harbor countries and things like that of, oh, I wrote a tool that could be used for encryption, but since I'm not extorting and I'm not actually hacking people directly, I can gather the payment, but it's not, it's that gray area. So this kind of gave birth to
how does
modern.
that work? Even if you're not distributing it, if you're collecting the payment.
That seems pretty shady to me, right?
Oh.
So GanCrab is what we're getting at. GanCrab was one of these first flavors of ransomware as a service, and there were some before it, but they really took it to the extreme. Affiliate programs, reseller programs, things along those lines. And where I'm going with this is, when GanCrab, they claimed they made enough money, right, and closed up shop in May.
Yeah. So they put it out, right? So who knows if you can believe it, but supposedly, they collected over $2 billion in extortion payments, of which they paid out most of it. I mean, don't get me wrong, like $2 billion is still a huge amount. Their claim,
a lot of money.
Well, so that's how much they took in. Their claim was that they made, for what they kept for themselves, $150 million in 1 year. So like they were saying that they were paying out between 60 and 70% of whatever the extortion payment was.
Yep. So we just dumped a link for anybody following. Obviously, it'll be a link in the comments as well for this video if you're watching on YouTube later. But Krebs on Security was the one who actually did a lot of that analysis of why they might be, air quote, retiring, what is the cost, how much money did they make. So all kinds of that useful information available there.
Yeah, but that's the first case I'd ever heard of where an attacker publicly said, we're retiring, rather than just like going to jail.
Yeah.
I'd never heard that before. That was legit for me. I thought, wow, that's...
So, John, before we share where this ransomware goes and what fills in the gap of GanCrab as a ransomware as a service, these ransomwares have to get installed by tons of different ways, and there's also people behind it as well, right? You want to share, like, maybe I can dive into the human role behind it, and then you pick up at the very end of, like, what's the technology enabling this? So this is where we go into a little bit of, like... who are the people behind it, right? As developers, you're talking to 3 developers who wrote intelligence gathering tools. So it should be no surprise to all of us that like intelligence gathering tools might be written by just developers. So I wanted to share one of the coolest articles I found on the internet about this was, believe it or not, the team at McAfee, which they actually dove in for Sodinokibi, which is a ransom we'll talk about later. But I want to share that there's actual places on the dark web where attackers are advertising, look, I make the ransomware, but I don't necessarily distribute it. So let's take a look at that real quick. And so if you take a look at this, this is on one of those dark web forums on the 4th of July, right? And you see they actually call out, we work in private mode, a limited number of seats, but they're so organized to the point that they actually set up an expectation that we're going to write the code for you. We're going to make it fully undetectable. And as you see here, this is a private ransomware. It's in pure C. We're in charge of making sure that it doesn't get detected by by anti-ransomware or malware, antivirus scanners, etc. And they set up, we're going to provide this to you. You're not allowed to deploy it in Ukraine and some other countries. Like what? Mm-hmm. Was it Syria that got added to that list later? Yeah. Russia was added on some.
Oh.
What we're getting at is there's some of these Cyrillic states that turn to be, a little bit more favorable for law. Okay. And so the ransomware authors actually put, forbid, like you're not allowed to deploy this in places with certain keyboards. Did you figure out?
It's the Commonwealth of Independent States. it was what was formed after Soviet Union.
So Eastern Bloc
yeah,
countries,
yeah,
things like that.
Yeah, okay.
So where we're going with this, if you take a look, this is a good example of the developers actually saying, we're going to provide this to you. But developers can't do it on their own. And I can tell you, you need people to get initial access. So John will probably dig into that initial access later. But what I want to share with you is it goes even beyond initial access. Sometimes after somebody hacks in and maybe gets access to, an MSP or access to a company, they need help spreading this. So take a look. This is another one of those forums on the dark web. And if you take a look here, this is somebody starting out saying, hey, is there a good and fast way to spread the ransomware? Like, I've got initial access into a company. I'm new to this and just want to know. And you can see the dark web delivers, right? One of my jobs is spreading malware. I can do it for you.
What a job.
Yeah. Followed with, if you're a noob, like, they're not even trying to, like, shame this guy. Yeah. They're welcoming. Like, oh, if you're a noob, don't do it by yourself. We can help you, right? I mean, sounds like, do you think
this is a super helpful forum?
Yeah.
Most forums, you'd get trolled. People would be making fun of you. No.
We can help spreading it for you. It's safer for you. So I'm in it for you. Do you think that these same like spreaders send out like cold calls and cold emails to ransom? Like, hey, I could cut down.
Yes. Probably.
Right? But this is the type of actual market that a lot of people don't think about behind ransomware as a service. And notice the person even, that comes in last here is he's actually pitching himself. To have a great conversion rate, don't do bulk mailing. He's worried about KPIs or key performance indicators, making sure he has great conversions. So that's interesting, right? So John, will you take it away? John, right, is our VP of Threat Ops. He sees this ransomware and malware and crap every day of the week. So John, share with us of like what they're using to spread. How does this usually work? How does this economy work?
Gotcha. So a lot of it is, at least what we were seeing last year up until this year, was phishing emails. You get a phishing email, somebody would accidentally click it, and they would drop some kind of Trojan. Commonly, TrickBot or Emotet was used. There was also Dridex malware as well, and then they would use that to deploy additional malware, which would ultimately lead to ransomware. Big one last year was Ryuk ransomware, started in August of 2018. I think those guys, or the team who runs that, is out of Russia as well. Grimspider, I believe, is what they're called.
Yeah, the CrowdStrike team calls them that.
Yeah, they're part of a larger group called Wizard Spider, which is the ones who operate.
Is that what they name themselves, or somebody else called them?
Yeah, CrowdStrike calls them Wizard Spider.
I think we need better handles. I'm going to be,
What did they say? Wizard Spider is the guys who operate the TrickBot group.
Oh.
And then a cell inside of that is Grimspider, and they're the ones who operate the Ryuk ransomware.
I didn't know.
So they work in conjunction with one another.
So I knew TrickBot tended to drop Ryuk, but I didn't realize that was because they were kind of made by the same people.
Yeah, I didn't know that either until I found this article. We'll paste the link.
Yeah, so I just threw that CrowdStrike link in there. I was even being suggested different names here. So I've got Lizard Spider Ninja. I'm Cuckoo Clock Kyle. Who else? I mean, John, you've got a bit of a, alliteration we could go here. All right, we're moving on. We're clearly going off the rails. But what we're saying is there's a whole economy here on building some of these tools to help spread. You'll see similarities. We've dropped the links because we could go really deep. But some of this analysis is really interesting when you get into the more advanced versions of ransomware, like we saw with Sodinokibi, which is this, new ransomware as a service, kind of at the top end of ransomware. And if you take a look, these actual actors behind the ransomware have built in backdoors to the ransomware. So for instance, if the affiliate is not providing good customer support to help decrypt the data, the actual ransomware authors has a skeleton key, for lack of a better word.
I think they call it a master key.
Is that what they call it? The master key to be able to decrypt files in case the affiliates aren't providing good support. So we're talking about, this is just absolute ridiculous levels. And maybe that's a good example to say, like, maybe we should dive into the technology side with ransomware, with these DLLs, with these EXEs they're pushing. Should we show maybe a little bit of like what goes under the hood of like if you're going to offer ransomware to somebody, how do you provide it? For instance, from a finance side of the house, but also then dive down into like what actual hurdles you need for execution, like the ability to configure it, whitelisting, things along those lines.
Yeah.
Okay, then I'm going to take it away with some of the funnier parts. So not all ransomware is created equally, and there's multiple of these ransomware as a service flavors. One of the things that was actually shared right before we started this webcast is one of the attendees actually shared a redacted FBI notice that was actually sharing like one of these major ransomware as a service players was used to attack, maybe it was a client or maybe a company or something like this. And so what I actually want to show is how does this dark web play into that, and how does this actual decision making go between, like, why does somebody choose to deploy Ryuk or Sodinokibi or GanCrab or any of the other flavors? So let's start with the dark web, guys. Why would somebody use the dark web to even share this information or offer it up while I get this started?
I mean, the dark web, by that I'm assuming you're meaning like
Tor forums.
Yeah. So generally the idea behind Tor was like, I want to be anonymous, and previously, if you were hosting a website, you could only be so anonymous, right? Like the authorities could go to the provider that was, where your servers were housed, and then they could kind of track you back from there via however you were paying or whatever. So people who wanted to be more anonymous, Tor or the Onion router, that kind of shifts your traffic around, wraps it in multiple layers. And so it's hard to figure out where is a Tor site actually hosted.
Yeah. So obviously hindering law enforcement efforts. Yeah. Safer place to exchange info. And at the end of the day, it's the same reason like Slack and Teams and everything is so productive. Collaboration makes you more productive whether you're in IT or whether you're in hacking. Yeah. So they need a place to collaborate. So as you can see here on one of these forums, right, dark web forums, you could see Sodinokibi at the top of their game. They actually come out and say, look, the starting rate, if you want to use Sodinokibi, one, you got to have skills. You got to prove yourself. But two, you're going to start out and you're only going to get 60% of everything you cash in. Me as the author who has to write all this and keep this ransomware up to date, you're going to need to give me 40%. And after the first 3 payments and you show me you're an actual good affiliate, I'm going to give you an extra 10% spiff, right? I'm going to bonus you and give you an extra 10%. Yeah. So, it turns out that the beauty of capitalism is sometimes what crazy things come from capitalism. Like, hey, those cats over there that are trying to get you with 30 or 40%, well, boy, do I have a deal for you. So here comes in I think this one's called Ranyan. And what's interesting about this is they flat out call it, don't want to share your profits with the developers? Come to us and we'll give you a flat fixed fee, right? No fees from your clients. You just pay us, what is this, a year, 12 months of it for $900. What a steal, right? You don't even have to worry about your margins going away. But notice they come with our stuff saying, sorry, this is sold as are or as is, right? No warranty needed, but they're willing to guarantee you it runs on 32 and 64-bit Windows. It's written in C#. It comes with a decryptor.
Oh, free customizations, though.
Yeah. I mean, they're giving you perks and upselling you, right?
I like it. 2 FUD exes.
Yeah, FUD, by the way.
I gotta wait for 6 months for the second one, though?
Yeah, FUD is fully undetectable, is a crimeware word.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so
I thought it was fear, uncertainty, and doubt.
No, this is fully undetectable, that it's going to get missed by the...
we got that double meaning.
Yep, the double entendre. And so naturally, we see more capitalism taking place. So this is the same group that's offering Ranyan, but they look and they said, hey, just like you, we're not fan of annual contracts. So we'll actually offer you a 1-month pay-as-you-go option. It's going to be a little bit more, and you get a little different support. Like, hey, we're not going to give you the FUD stubs.
Oh, so if process isn't unkillable.
Yep, but if you go all in on a 1-year contract, we'll get you. So this is once again sales and marketing economics all the way down. And it just keeps going on.
I think this is the thing that, for me, became a huge difference, like pre-GanCrab and post-GanCrab, is like, pre-GanCrab was just everybody doing it for themselves. Post-GanCrab, now there's like a whole economy and marketplace, and like I was saying before, like they have a sales channel.
Yeah, I mean, take a look at these. Even sales gimmicks follow over, right? So this is, another one. This is InPivx, INPIVX. And Impivix even has a Halloween special ending on 10/31/2019 that you can get this discount, right? $300 instead of
Logic
500.
Bomb, source code, no license.
We'll give you the cryptor, a la carte purchasing. So this is the type of
They've got all
nonsense we're
sorts of
talking about.
add-ons, too.
Yeah, I mean,
holy cow.
right. So this is one of those places where we can kind of go tell we're blue in the face. All of these are on Tor websites, and I see it looks like chat is full of people laughing about this type of stuff. But yeah, this is ransomware as a service, and this is what the marketplace looks like before we even get into the fun technical stuff. So kudos to these folks for being innovative, and kudos to capitalism for winning here and showing look.
Kudos? I don't know.
I
think it's just a byproduct of capitalism. It's crazy, right?
Yeah. So do we have any questions? Andrew, are you on here, bud, to see if we have any good questions? It seems like a good time. We're about halfway through this episode.
We got a few. Somebody asked what happens if they scan the QR code on your shirt, kind of off topic, but
yeah. If you scan the QR code, it might make your phone say malware installed successfully.
Yep.
So
somebody asked, how are they blocking the countries? Like the CIS countries in Syria, is it like keyboard layout, geolocation? How are they doing it?
Yeah, previously we've seen both of those, right? We've seen some of it's IP, but that's weak. A whole lot on what actual language do you have the keyboard layout? And the other one is what language is your actual font and stuff like that. So those are very common. And I think all of the actual families that we've shared so far, that has been common. So
Edward asked a really interesting question. He said, has anyone tried to purchase from one of these sources to obtain a master decryption key?
Well, we've never seen anything like it, but it also starts getting into the legality. We'll share in the next couple weeks of where we're aware of a handful of MSPs that hackers have access to these MSPs, and they're selling access on these same forums, just the same way we showed you. And we're having a hard time figuring out how can we actually warn MSPs in advance without paying the attackers. The lawyers flat out said, no bueno. Yeah, and think about it. You're enabling hackers, right? You're paying a ransom.
Well, it's also hard to defend after the fact. Anybody who gets caught with drugs is going to be like, look, these weren't my drugs. They were my friend's drugs, right? So if we pay and buy ransomware, we're in the same position. No, trust me, this isn't our ransomware. We were testing it. I don't know. It's a legal gray area where we like to sit behind this desk and not in prison. So.
Yep. So where we're going with this is there's a lot of different flavors, a lot of this nonsense that in ways this actually gets pushed, right? Whether it's the tools, whether it's the sales strategy, whether it's in, the code is written in C#, C++, C. I've even seen some crazy stuff on the forums where people came through and was like, I'm just learning to code. I want to ship it in Ruby or Python. And immediately the old graybeards of the forum come and said unless you're shipping the interpreter as well, that is a terrible, terrible decision because they might not have, Ruby or Python already installed. It's a heck of a lot easier if every computer has PowerShell. Write it in at least PowerShell if you're not familiar with managed languages. So where else? What do we got here, guys, that we could take this?
Well, I got two more questions. The second one leads into the next part. So Jesse asked, wasn't there a report of some larger companies that specialize in ransomware accused of negotiating and buying keys and then charging the clients a premium over that?
Yeah. There was definitely some of this of a company I know, Renee Dudley she used to be at Reuters, now at ProPublica. Highlighted, it was Monster or something or other. I won't even give them credit. Let's not even mention their name.
It was something like that.
This is a team that was flat out. They were paying the actual authors, claiming they decrypted the keys and making money in the process.
Right, because their big
super
claim
slimy.
was we wrote some software, it can decrypt any ransomware. It's basically magic. Pay us a bunch of money. And then it was totally exposed that they were just taking the money and then buying the keys. So come on. All right, so next one. Limey McLimey, limier than you, says, what do you see as one of the best solutions to prevent lateral movement by ransomware? So this kind of gets into the next stuff that we have is like, how do you stay safe? So we want to like answer that one
That's
first.
a good one. I know with Ryuk ransomware, according to the CrowdStrike articles, they're actually using, once they're in the network, they're using PS exec. So they're using stolen credentials to push the ransomware dropper to all the hosts. So things like making sure you have unique passwords on all your hosts.
Admin specifically.
Two-factor authentication, those kind of things. So somebody can't get access to one system and then go to all of them.
That's interesting because that's also going to be hard to detect for a lot of people because they legitimately use PS exec to do some like remote control capabilities. So how do you detect when it's legitimate PS exec versus PS exec from ransomware? That's
It's hard. Also, like a lot of RMM tools, their initial deployment is using the administrator shares.
really
So if you don't have those kind of things enabled, you bite yourself later.
yeah. So I guess like so this section is like how to stay safe. I put a little note in here that said basically perfect prevention is hope and hope isn't a good strategy. So and that's kind of like how we at Huntress like feel about it is like let's not like hope we're good. Let's try to figure out what are attackers doing. Where are we vulnerable? Where are we weak? And like let's like get better at that or figure out how to lock it down or whatever. So continuing along with that, like how do we stay safe or how do MSPs or IT departments like stay safe from ransomware? How do they either avoid getting it in the first place or reduce its ability to encrypt files or laterally move from host to host?
Yeah, when we wrap up, I've got a whole tirade on backups, what they're good for, what they're not good for. But at the end of the day, like ransomware is here to stay, and perfect prevention is not a real strategy. So we'll dive into like how some of these are more effective, how some security researchers have found like ways to like. We recently had a partner that what was it? It was a large insurance firm that was encrypted in mass, right? Almost 1,000 computers. And we ended up discovering that there was a kill switch, more or less, in it. That if you pre-created a file that was indication of like you were in a sandbox, right? I think they were looking for the Windows Defender sandbox. You could actually stop the ransomware from moving, but that is not a strategy.
Right. Those are cute and they work in some cases, but like, what are you going to do? Just go and try to drop 300 files? Like, not all ransomware has like a kill switch that's based on a file or anything.
And as soon as attackers realize that people are doing it, they're going to change.
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah. Did you have more like
I wanted to
Sodinokibi details?
I wanted to dive into it. If we thought we'll have more Q&A in just a little bit, but I think that was a good breakup. So let's talk about it. If I'm Kyle behind Sodinokibi and I'm the developer of this software, I need Chris to gain initial access and John to spread it. You're going to need some like actual infrastructure in place. And one of the best articles that dove into this was the McAfee researchers did a really great job at articulating how Sodinokibi works. And we're actually going to do some live analysis of what we've actually saw. So we'll go back to screen sharing here real quick and we'll dive into this together. So if we take a look right in this blog, right, from McAfee, we see their team is actually highlighted like, yeah, there's Sodinokibi, and it comes as a packed exe. It creates some mutexes to make sure only one sample is running at a time, right? It does no good if you encrypt a file twice. Now you have twice the decryptors, and that's bad customer support. But things that you may not have considered is, if I'm giving Chris my ransomware, and it's up to him to get initial access and John to spread, they need their ability to have their own unique IDs. I need to be able to make sure that I'm paying the Chris and John team their 60%, right? They also want to have some configuration. So, Chris, you've written more than one intelligence gathering tools. Is this anything different than like what you provide operators to have the ability to configure based on the target environment?
No, I mean, this is pretty common, right? Like they want to be able to say, hey, I know something specific about my audience, about the people I'm targeting. And because I know that, I want to do something or I want to avoid something. I think these are just like common asks, right? Yep. I'm sure the people who wrote Sodinokibi and Gancraft and stuff, they were probably on these like forums and attackers were probably asking these questions. hey, how do I avoid encrypting X? Or how do I, I know that my target has their backups in such and such a folder.
Yep.
How do I also make sure we delete those backups so they can't just restore? Those kind of things. I think they just took that feedback to heart and built it in.
I mean, it is. It's product feedback, right? And their customers are these shady people delivering the ransomware. So let's dive into some of these feature requests, right? One, which is, how do I make sure I get paid what I'm deserved? Right? So this is the affiliate ID. We can actually take a look here where, I know for a fact that if I get paid, my affiliate ID might be number 1. And every single customer that pays in should be paid, or paid back to me my 60 or 70%.
Right. Yeah, that's how the people actually running Sodinokibi or GanCrab or Ryuk, that's how they know who the commission should go to. So that when they get the encryption, after the encryption happens, like Sodinokibi sends basically this config and they send some other stuff up to the Sodinokibi infrastructure. And then the attackers on the back end say, 6 more encrypted hosts came from this affiliate. So once we get the money from these hosts, then we pay that affiliate. So that's how they associate who actually spread the ransom with who should get paid.
Yep. On top of it, John is the operator actually doing that. He might want to make certain decisions. Like, take a look at this. They have a Boolean option, right? True or false. Should it do a fast wipe? And if you think about that, if you're running, for instance, maybe some type of super hot next-gen AV that's pretty great about behavior, you might only get a finite amount of time before a system realizes, you know what, this same process has now written, every single byte of hundreds of files. I'm going to stop you and shut you down. So for instance, a wipe off or a fast option here says, do I only want to encrypt the first megabyte of each file? And you could imagine that's much faster, especially on disk I/O. Instead of having to encrypt, like if I encrypt your database and I get your first meg, maybe the rest of the database is there, but it's still partial, right? But the first meg is damaging enough.
Most files, if you look at file formats, for the majority, the beginning of the file is going to be all the metadata,
file
locations, file structure. So if you get that kind of stuff, even if the rest of the data is still there, it's going to be really hard to come back from it. I mean, in theory, somebody could pull it into a hex editor or something and try to carve out some of the other data that wasn't encrypted. But another use case for that would be, what if I have a network file system that has either tons of files on it or really large files on it? I don't want my ransomware to spend all day trying to encrypt one, 16 gig video file. Because then they lost one file, they didn't lose everything. I want it to get as many files as it can. So maybe fast in some cases like that is a really great option.
Yep. So for instance, if that was part of your job, which was speed, right? You're trying to race against the clock and you're trying to get things that are most effective. You could understand why whitelists would be useful. For instance, we see here WHT. This is a whole section that has multiple whitelists in the JSON blob, right? For instance, what file directories or folders, right? I don't want to encrypt anything in the Windows directory because I don't want to take the operating system down. That's a denial of service. That's not ransom. And their whole goal is they want you to know that you can recover so they can get you back, maybe encrypt you again later. But most importantly, they want to know you have confidence that you'll pay. Taking a step back, right? Which files to whitelist? So for instance, a lot of times they're like, you know what? Don't ever encrypt ntuser.dat, which is like registry hives. If anything's named ntuser.dat, don't decrypt or don't encrypt that because we don't want to make somebody's profile not usable.
Right. If they can't log in, they can't get the ransom note, they can't pay you, their computer's unusable. Like everything that the attackers are doing here is trying to maximize their chance that you pay ransom.
And John, you see boatloads of malware families, not just Sodinokibi. You see Ryuk, you see Dharma, Crisis, you name it. What are some of the common things that you see? I mean, I didn't even mention file extensions. What are some of the common file extensions you see like ransomware just completely skip?
Skip. INI files.
Yep.
Let's see.
Config files to make
files, text files get encrypted, but INI files, config files.
EXEs, DLLs, PEs.
With Ryuk ransomware is it doesn't whitelist a lot of files, so it ends up encrypting things that it probably shouldn't have, and potentially damaging the system more so than others. I think it only excludes like 3 files by default.
Yeah. So you could imagine as being someone like me that's the ransomware developer, I want these features so I can attract Chris and John. And if we take a look here, we've got all kinds of them. Folders to target. So for instance, give priority to folders with this name. Processes to kill. And maybe the best way for us to do this, should I actually just share like maybe some of the, we see, roughly 70 MSPs, or sorry, excuse me, we've seen about 50 MSPs that we know have been encrypted. Sometimes we get the samples, sometimes we don't. And we took a look at our list of unique Sodinokibi infections. And what do we have, guys? We had about 70 Sodinokibi infections. Some were MSPs, some were not. Some were commercial customers. Some were just samples we found on Pastebin and Pastebin only. So maybe the most useful thing here is to dive into this a little bit and show the configs and show how some of this stuff works. You guys think that's the next good place for us to go?
That would be a good place.
So where I'm going to go then with that said is you get these ransomware files and they look like garbage, right? They typically look like a Pastebin payload, and I'm sure with a little bit of Googling we could find one. We've shared them before, but you end up with a DLL. And what I want to share is this DLL, this is the thing that's actually running, or the PE that's actually running and infecting and encrypting these machines. And this is also the thing that goes and wipes backups, etc. But you're able to actually carve out and decrypt the config files. And I don't mean decrypt the actual files that are being encrypted.
Right.
Different decryption here.
Right.
So don't get excited.
Right.
But
We're not saying we can decrypt your ransom machines.
Oh, come on, guys. I heard it. Huntress said you could decrypt all the machines. Go to Reddit about it. Post immediately. No, but realistically, on Sodinokibi, with a little bit of feng shui or a little bit of skills, you can actually decrypt some of these entire payloads. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share. We'd actually gone earlier, and this is an example of some of these decrypted payloads where it comes out in one giant blob. Now notice this is an actual example of what this blob looks like now that we pretty printed it. So for instance, this here is actor number 28, affiliate ID number 28, who chose, they don't want a fast wipe, right? And notice here, they've got a pretty standard list of don't encrypt anything in Google folders, program files, Firefox, etc. John already called it out that some of the INI files, INF files, but notice they have all kinds of file extensions that they want to whitelist, right? Don't encrypt the screensavers because there's no value. Don't encrypt the cursor files or EXEs because we don't want to make the system unusable. We want somebody to be able to pay, right? All the way down to oldschool.com files. But notice what they actually prioritize if we go back to that other article here of what folders to target. They want to target anything called a backup file.
Yeah. Specifically, the WFLD setting there is folders to wipe. So if it finds anything in a folder named backup, it's going to delete every file in there. It doesn't even encrypt them, it just deletes them.
Yep, so it's going and saying, hey, what do I need to wipe here? I need to wipe the backup folders. But it starts getting interesting. Anybody want to explain some of these? Like these are processes to kill that's now listed in here.
So some of these, like things like Excel, what else have we got in here?
We got Word. Why would you want to kill Word, John?
You don't want open files, so you
Yep.
terminate the process so you can encrypt the Word document. Same with Excel. I think I saw in there some.
So some OneNote, Oracle was in there.
Yeah.
What? Why would you want to kill?
Go back up to the top. The weird one. My desktop service. If you have a custom desktop, I guess
Maybe.
we were trying to decide what this was. John suggested that maybe it was like if you had like a custom desktop that was up, they wanted to close that out so that you could actually see the ransom note on the actual desktop.
Yeah, that was the only thing I could think. You can see they disable or terminate anything SQL processes,
Yeah.
so they can encrypt your database files that they're running.
Yeah, because those are the things at the end of the day that will actually cause clients and companies to pay ransom. You don't pay ransom if they got your cursor files. Maybe you had backups of your Word documents, but do you have the latest production backups of your database? Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah.
Right? And it keeps going on. Domains to call back to. You can imagine how some of this stuff works. But we're going to end here on some of the things that are more interesting. For instance, what services to kill? Does anybody know something really interesting in this case? If you see something with Sophos, kill the Sophos service. Like, that's literally targeting antivirus. Or even better, if you have it running against Veeam backups. This is where you can imagine maybe John decides he's targeting somebody that's in like a very specific environment using Veeam, using Sophos. I can tailor my ransomware to you. And I don't even have to ask the developers or go back to me for support, right? That's one less support ticket as the ransomware author I need to worry about.
Yep.
Other things like the body. This is the actual contents of the actual files themselves. So when you get the message that says, "Hello again, I encrypted you," that's a boilerplate contents that other actors can actually change, all the way down to like, what do you want your file name to be? Extension, and for whatever reason they were being punny here, right? Instead of "wanna cry," they were going with "wanna die."
I can say we've talked to some people who got all their machines ransomwared, and they maybe wanted to die after that.
Yeah, I could see that, especially the MSPs that had every client, right?
Yeah.
So it makes sense, right? That's really them poking and then kind of turning the sword or turning the knife inside the wound there. So anyways, these are things that's not specific to Sodinokibi, but we wanted to share with you how this works. And so Chris, being the data scientist that he is, he came up with the world's most elite. So 70 samples of Sodinokibi. We decoded or decrypted all these configs, and we actually went and took a look to see what is unique and what is not. So for the MSPs out there, some of these are actual actors targeting you. So we were talking in the pregame of which one of these was used to target the last MSP we worked with. And I was taking a peek real quick, and what actually shocked me the most was one of these IDs, number 28 here, each asterisk, Chris, this represents is one.
Yep.
So we can actually take a look that one of these affiliates that was targeting MSPs and things like that was also one of the more prevalent ones. Meanwhile, one of these ones that just happened is somebody just ramping up. It only targeted, right, affiliate ID 33 of the sample set of 70 has only targeted 3, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that, they've only done 3. This is just the Hunter sample set from these 70 Sodinokibi samples.
Right, and a lot of these came from Pastebin. Some of them came from samples we got off of infected customers. So a lot of this sample set is kind of biased by how we got it, right? Like it just might happen to be that these attackers were the ones who figured out how to leverage Pastebin, and other attackers were using other means of deploying it. So it's hard to say by that, but you can see like there was one attacker, whoever affiliate 23 is, like they were encrypting a lot of machines.
Yeah, they're getting it done, right? So Chris, do you mind, since we're at the very end before we open up for Q&A, you want to give us some real quick analysis of what you're seeing and what you read by this small sample set?
Sure. So I kind of broke down each of the interesting fields in the config to try and see like how do these vary across the configs that we have, and are there unique things? Is everybody using the same stuff? So you can see here I started with like the whitelisted folders, and almost all of them are very similar. You can see like Windows is whitelisted, Mozilla, Google, Tor browsers, right? They don't want to, and we talked about this before, they don't want to destroy your system. Some of the interesting ones here were like some people decided they did want to encrypt the recycle bin. You can see there's fewer cases there where that was whitelisted. If we keep going down, whitelisted files was almost exactly the same, except for somebody or two different configs were whitelisting command.exe. I don't know why.
And to be honest, command.exe is usually excluded. If you take a look at these ones where you see uniformity, we can more or less derive that this is probably some type of sample configuration.
Yeah, it's probably like a default.
Yeah. Meanwhile, somebody was being extra sure command.exe was not getting hosed.
Yeah. And so you can see a similar thing for whitelisted extensions where these are pretty clearly the defaults. Everybody has them, but as you scroll down here, you'll notice that there's like some other ones, and we were kind of hypothesizing before the show started, like somebody did not want to encrypt ISOs, MP3s, and AVIs. I don't know why.
I mean, maybe they're saving me my Rick Astley collection.
I guess.
Little do they know that's what I would actually pay the ransom for.
I mean, maybe for most cases your collection of MP3s would be gone, but those attackers, they wanted you to keep those MP3s?
Yep.
Okay.
Here's a good one, though, right? What folders to wipe?
Yeah, what folders to wipe? Clearly, if you are doing like your own backups and storing them locally, do not put them in a folder named backup or backups. Put them in some other folder because that attackers are looking to delete anything in those folders. Also, you see Veeam here. So clearly, the attackers knew their targets and knew they were using Veeam. Moving on to like the processes to kill. A lot of these again are the same. These are probably defaults. As we scroll down, we get to some of the more outliers, some of the slightly more interesting ones. Somebody clearly like configured their ransomware to target some additional stuff that wasn't on the generic configs.
Yeah, kill the bat, right? Kill MySQL, SQL writers, Firefox configurations, pretty much anything that would have a locked file handle that prevent, a file from being overwritten by ransomware. Yeah. They wanted to maximize it to make sure they got some extra stuff. So super interesting there, including like your PST file. Right. If Outlook, if you're running the desktop Outlook instead of O365, you're not going to be able to get the PST.
Yep.
That is something someone will actually pay for. This next one, though, samples by service. This is actually, if there's a service running, kill it. Is that correct, Chris?
Yes.
So, that was another one of those. A couple people had, hand tweaked. Yep. If volume shadow copies are running, kill it. Backups are running. Anything that starts or ends with SQL, kill it.
Yep. And then samples by note name. For the most part, the attackers actually let you configure it, even down to how do you want the ransomware note to be named. Like what's the format you want here. So you can see for the most part, it was the extension. So when Sodinokibi encrypts a file, say that was foo.pdf, it's going to generate a random extension, and it's going to name it foo.pdf.a3xb9, right? And the whole point of that is they're trying to make it a little bit easier for you to find which files are encrypted. So in theory, you should be able to like just search the hard drive for all the files that end in that same exact extension, and you should be able to find all the files that are encrypted so you can really quickly see what damage has been done and figure out like if you want to pay or not. So they do that with the same thing with the README files. They take that the extension that they randomly generated and append -readme.txt, and in that is the ransomware node. Do you have an example of the ransomware nodes?
I don't have one on here, but yeah, they're almost egregious.
Yeah, they're pretty simple. Like it says like welcome again. What happened? Oh, we encrypted all your files. Like they're pretty arrogant, but I mean they're attackers. What are you gonna do?
Yep.
But they say it's not personal.
It's not personal. It's just business.
Just the business. Yes.
All right. So ways to end, gentlemen. Right. We're at the top of our hour. We got to leave it with some suggestions on what you can actually do. And I'll kick this one off. Right. There's different ways to market yourself. Right. And a good example of this one was, and there's nothing against, we actually have a boatload of partners that use Sophos, but the difference of how you market yourself really changes what happens after an incident happens. For instance, this was the incident that happened a couple years ago when WannaCry kicked off. Yep. Right? Sophos's marketing was very bold, and they clearly believed in their product. It was so bold it says the NHS is totally protected with Sophos. Then WannaCry happened, and they
actually the NHS came out and said we are so encrypted we can't do anything.
Yep. So if you don't want to have to backtrack to change it to Sophos understands the security needs of NHS, don't start this out with bold claims, right? Perfect prevention is not your strategy against ransomware. That's not a strategy at all.
And to be fair, we're not trying to pick on Sophos or anything.
Every single vendor, even Huntress missed stuff. It's crazy to say anybody.
I think when the Sophos marketing team wrote that, I don't think their intention was Sophos is going to protect you from all the ransomware. I think they were just trying to say Sophos will protect you from malware. But you gotta kind of take a stand. They kind of took a stand on the side of we're going to protect you from everything, but there's no perfect solution. So when you do that, you're just kind of opening yourself up to get egg on your face.
Yeah. As the CISO, inform your board that incidents are going to happen. As an MSP, inform your clients incidents are going to happen. Prepare them for this.
I think that's the best thing that you can do, right? If you kind of go in there and pitch hey, we're buying this product and we're going to have perfect. It's going to be awesome.
Yep.
You're going to get in trouble. Like just go in there and say, hey, look, we're buying these things. Here's why. Here's what they hope that will do. But know and understand that there is always a risk.
Yeah. So, avoid these charlatan-like claims, right? 2016, have we finally found an answer to the ransomware epidemic? You see, like my answer in 2016 has not changed. Only answer is backups, right? Competent developers will create unstoppable variants. But that's not a simple answer either, gentlemen. Like we're getting ready to do a webcast with the team at Datto because backups are being targeted, right? So we'll announce more information on that stuff. But like your backups can't just be on-prem. You see, backups were targeted by all these ransomware flavors. So keep that in mind as you're deciding like how you're actually going to rack and stack this up. And I think the much better way to be able to approach this is like, look, let's be real. When incidents happen, let's be aware that sometimes things gets bad. So this was an article that I pulled up at the very end of October. This happened to be an MSP CEO, I believe. And he said, oh, look, I got egg on my face, right?
Oh, my God. Literally egg on his face.
Yeah. So
I
he
swear
said,
I didn't know that was coming up.
We help companies maintain their computers, and one of our clients got ransomed. This is the way to own it because this is how it happens.
Yeah.
But notice the way that they actually said it is, look, even the companies that have the biggest, deepest IT pockets get hit. That's true. We see this every day.
Who was the bank recently?
There's been a handful of them, right? The big bank that's down. I remember Spain's largest radio company just got hit this month, right? We've got billion-dollar companies that still get hit with ransomware. It happens.
Yeah.
But what this CEO actually did, which is impressive, is they called it out and they said, look, our backups got hit. Because the way that we're running, we were up and restored within a handful of hours, right? This is not a pitch for Datto. I don't know if their stuff works better than other people, but there's a lot of people that say positive things about it. So take that for credit. With that said, they called it out. We're using ESET and Cylance. They had a bad day. However, they noticed some of the workstations that were hit that were worse than others were ones that didn't have Cylance.
Oh.
So that's a cool thing. Call it out, right? You as MSPs and IT departments, we as an industry can only get better when we start sharing these stories. Notice they actually said, look, the workstations, instead of being on Datto, they backed them up with Carbonite, right? Less than $300 a year, 250 gigs to the cloud. They talked about how they restored it. They talked about hurdles they ran into with the restore. Like, for instance, from the UI, they actually said, like, you could only restore, like, one file at a time. But if you log in a support request, they were able to actually, it was impossible to select more than an individual file. There were too many. So we called the team. Make sure your vendors have these capabilities is where we're going, right? And notice his recap says, look, this crap happens. Despite it happening, we used the layered security. We got to test our security stack, and we know how well it works and how well it doesn't. But the end goal is this customer was back up. And I think the answer was, hey, these 6 minutes will prepare you. And they got their customers back up and running. If you notice, they actually called out 18 and a half hours to get them up and running. That's a pretty good success story. Set those expectations. 18 hours of downtime sucks, but it's a lot better than, and as you're writing your MSAs, promising they're going to be up in 4 hours, you're probably setting too high of a bar. And where I'll end this stuff at is not all backups are created equally. We've flat out seen some backup companies couldn't restore mass amounts of data when you have 2,500 plus endpoints encrypted. So keep that in mind. And as I'll end this stuff here, share the threats, right? Share the threat intel. If you're seeing these hot things happen, literally customer, not email support at Huntress Labs, right? Reach out to your local FBI field office. If you're living near a big city that's got a big a large enough airport or an NFL team, you'll have an FBI field office. They'll talk to you for free. Do it and share this with your vendors, whether it's with the MSP ISAC or whether it's the TSP ISAO. You need to start sharing this information and write blogs, write it on LinkedIn, share it on Twitter. This is how we get our info, and this is the best we can do for the time being.
Some of the best way to get it out there is, like you said, MSP ISAC or TSP ISAO is like, once you share it with them, a bunch of other vendors are going to see it. So vendors can be on the lookout for the same type of attacks or try and move quickly. And a lot of times, we'll send out a thing to our customers and say, hey, FYI, there's a thing going on. Be prepared type stuff. So it kind of amplifies the message, really.
Yeah. So we're done with our Huntress portion, but it's always stick around if you're able to stay. We always do Q&A and kind of do ad hoc here if you're interested. So one of the great questions somebody asked, it said, do these samples have privilege escalation? Right? How can you encrypt, for instance, like the backups if only privileged users have it? So one of the things in Sodinokibi, it actually includes an exploit. I think it's for Win32 k.sys that actually escalates privileges.
Right. It's from like 2018. It's a CVE from 2018.
Yeah. So if you're not patching, they're using some of these +1 days to escalate privileges to encrypt more, or to get file shares, or to run as users. So yeah, 110% privilege escalations are in all kinds of families, not just Sodinokibi. That's it's 2019 that happens.
Right. Yeah, and that allows them, like, say they get onto like a terminal server or something, or in one person's profile, but there's like 8 profiles on the machine. Well, ideally they'd like to get all of the profiles on the machine, all users. So escalating to admin allows them to do that.
Yep. Lateral movement too. We've seen some big changes in lateral movement. So one of the questions somebody asked was in regards to gaining access to users and spreading laterally, whether it's through email. One of the features that RYUK just added, or Ryuk just added on the 1st of November, and I'll pull this one up even though I don't have it, is the ability to do wake on LAN. So when they encrypt inside your network, if you have a flat network that they can effectively, they pull the ARP cache, they send out a wake on LAN feature. So if you have the ability to like wake computers up and patch them, they're abusing that feature to wake you up. And it's not only that, to be able to wake you up so they can spread, they got really creative. And this, I think, is really good on the antivirus. For instance, if they've got a computer that's infected and the malware or the encryptor is now running, they've bypassed antivirus. So remember how John started out and he said a lot of these will move laterally with like psexec to spread. The problem with that is now I've got to mount a file share, I've got to execute a new process, and that's a new chance for me to get caught by antivirus.
Yeah.
So what they did is after they wake on LAN all these computers, they decided, I'm going to mount your remote file share to my local file share. And the reason for that is if I have privileges as that user, one, my ransomware is already running, and now I can just be on one box encrypting all of these new files and shares mounted instead of having to recreate my processes on each computer. So that's a really savvy thing that's just changed, and I'll find that here to share real quick.
I just shared the Wake on LAN one.
Okay, that's perfect. Was that the CrowdStrike team that did that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw there were a few other vendors had added that to their network, IDS signatures and stuff like that. So,
the Ubiquity team. Yeah, the Ubiquity team added this to their security gateways. That if you have a wake on LAN that followed the format that this ransomware was using, that Ryuk was using, automatically put a notice if you're using the security gateway. So that's that defense in depth really working there.
Yep. All right. Any other tips, techniques for staying safe? I noted a few here. Backups. We talked about having them off-site. Verify your backups. I can't tell you how many. I can't tell you how many people turn on backups and they're like, "Yeah, we're good," and then later they're like,
realize it's not working.
Yeah, those backups running. I don't know. I said I put in here a note about analyzing your endpoints from an attacker perspective. So think of things like vulnerability scans running like Nessus, or like paying a third party to do vulnerability scans against all your endpoints. Looking for open ports, things like just Nmap, or there's a bunch of tools on the internet. You can say oh, this is the IP address of this customer's site. See what ports are open. Obviously, you're looking for things like 3389, rogue web servers that maybe used to point to something but don't anymore. Obviously, check for any exposed services. That's going to be kind of under the open ports. And then the only last thing I said was hey, stay up to date with attacker techniques. Obviously, if you're watching Tradecraft Tuesday, you're doing that. So yeah, try to figure out what are attackers doing, and even if I can't be protected from it before the attackers start doing it, maybe I can change my ways and get protected before I become the victim too.
Yep. I think that's huge, absolutely huge. So do your part, select your vendors wisely. Right? Look at the ones that are actually taking a proactive approach, and stay safe, stay updated, right? This isn't all doom and gloom. This is a solvable problem. Ransomware as a service is a business. You're in the business of combating ransomware as a service as an IT department in 2019. So without further ado, I didn't see any major questions. This is a good way to wrap it up, gentlemen.
Yeah. The only things I was going to hit is if you're curious about previous episodes of Tradecraft Tuesday or you missed one or something, YouTube channel.
Yeah, YouTube, and it'll be Huntress. So I think it's literally youtube.com/c/Huntress.
Yep.
C meaning channel.
Yep. So we got Tradecraft Tuesday videos up there. We try to post those. Usually it takes a day or two for us to kind of do some of the final editing of these and post those. Send us an email if you have ideas for future episodes, right? Things to cover, or you find like some interesting, article in the news and you would like us to talk about it or give the perspective for how it relates to IT departments or MSPs. Some places will be in the future, shows that we're going to be attending. Robin Robbins Producers Club.
Yep, always there.
Frankly, MSP is going to be in Santa Barbara, California.
Avic show, yep.
PerchyCon.
PerchyCon in Tampa. That'll be tons of fun.
Yep. So those are kind of the places we're going to be. So if you're interested in Huntress or want to talk Tradecraft Tuesday, come see us. We'll be at any of those conferences. Anybody got anything else?
I've got the way to end this episode, and I think it's the most ridiculous of all. Right? So not only when you are when you're in the ransomware as a service market, you sometimes got to have cheerleaders to help suggest that you're worth going in as. And I think this is probably the best way to end this episode. Give me one second here to pull up the screen sharing, and this is how we're going to end it, ladies and gents. Yeah, I lost the mouse. Don't judge me. This is a live show. All right. Live show. Here we go. So sometimes you need somebody to suggest and be your cheerleader for ransomware as a service.
Some champion.
Yeah, right. So this is the Sodinokibi champion that we all aspire to be, right? I work with these nice young people. Nice, very nice. I switched to them after the crab, Gan crab. I tell you what, the crab was worse. So, we were joking earlier of like, what are all the things that we could do to engage with the community better? And I think maybe this might have to be our very first Tradecraft Tuesday shirt. The crab was worse. I love Sodinokibi. So, if you see us out and about, ask us when the shirts are happening.
The crab is always worse.
The crab is worse. All right. Enough shenanigans. Without further ado, thank you for joining us for our November 2019 episode of Tradecraft Tuesday.
Hope to see you next time. Until then, have a good one.
What nonsense.